Socialism only works in two places: heaven, where they don't need it, and hell, when they already have it. Ronald Reagan. That sounds about right. Well, I know where he is. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Perspective Philosophy, where we try to better our perceptions of the world through philosophical discussion. In today's episode, I'm going to be responding to r/capitalism. Sit down, relax, and let's enjoy ourselves. I hope you're all having a lovely night, and I hope everyone, go and let the people from r/capitalism, maybe show them some love. They're doing me a favor here, given with this glorious content to respond to. How else would socialists have a laugh? Let's just jump straight into it. So we're going for top this month. We'll be nice and charitable to the capitalists, I think anything that's been upvoted by them surely must be good, right? Like, that's how that works. Communism should be blacklisted and carry the same stigma as Nazism or fascism. Whoa! Okay, right, okay. What do you mean? Communism should be blacklisted. Many times people died under communism and Nazism, both the terrorist ideologies that cause genocides, but communism is more than Nazism. I'm assuming that he means like Stalinism and like Maoism and stuff like that. Remember, guys, seize the means of subscription, Oh, okay. No, he's including socialism and syndicalism, forcing others to support you instead of supporting yourself. Absolutely not. The idea behind it is economic liberation of the working class. The whole point of communism versus capitalism, the difference really is, like, I would say primarily, is the employer-employee relationship. When Marx talked about his critique of capitalism, really he was talking about like the alienation of the working class from the means of production and their own labor, their ability to actually own what they produce, their ability to control their actions within the workplace, the ability to own the workplace, and so on. That's essentially the difference. Like, it's not asking people for your support. You don't necessarily need to have a welfare system, even in socialism. I mean, it kind of does follow through. It does make follow through. It does actually follow from the concept, since the socialist market is supposed to be a venture of mutual cooperation. It's supposed to be a social endeavor in which it benefits society. And that's what socialists want. They want the market to reflect the overall good of humanity and those individuals who exist within the market, rather than the market to be its own end, which is just profit. And I mean, we see so many issues with capitalism today having caused, deaths and even atrocities because of this market goal being profit without considering the human cost. A good example would be the Iraq War. But it's based on laziness, entitlement, and false premises about human nature. No, it's not, because many socialists, for example, Paulo Verno, reject human nature. Communism always works in the short term, so people are fooled. That's not true. You can always take other people's resources until you run out of resources to take. I mean, I don't know what he thinks. We're not like the Iron Isles, from Game of Thrones, we do not sow. The whole point is, no one gets to keep the fruits of their labor, so communism punishes success, arbitration by nature. That's not true at all. The whole point is to give back people the fruits of their labor. The idea is capitalism is actually pushing away the fruits of your labor, because it is ultimately alienating the individual from their labor in terms of a wage. You are paid X amount per hour. You are rented as an individual to a corporation. Someone rents you, buys you from a labor market, and you are then a slave to do whatever task they tell you to do. You have no autonomy. You have no real freedom within the corporation, and any rights that you have had to be fought for from labor unionist movements, usually trying to give you back some level of dignity. But I don't see I don't know what you think communism is, to be entirely honest with you. And that's just too long, so I'm not going to read it. So I'm already mad. Socialism only works in two places: heaven, where they don't need it, and hell, when they already have it. Ronald Reagan. That sounds about right. Well, I know where he is. COVID-19 has spread more Marxism than Stalin. That's probably because people are getting fed up of how exploited they are. I mean, the fact that we're seeing individuals now, especially in the United States, under increased economic strain, they're starting to realize that the economic system is benefiting a certain group of select individuals and not them. I mean, how much money has Amazon made over COVID-19? It is being an insane amount of money because of the rise in e-commerce. But the average individual is struggling more and more, trying to sustain themselves as their corporate masters are throwing them under the bus to save themselves and save their profit margins and save their assets. And this just shows you why capitalism is a ultimately failing ideology, because it ultimately preserves the the interests of the few over the interests of the many. Science proves communism makes nations poorer and less healthy. Science. I want to know how science proves that anyway. Like, deep cultural ancestry and human development indicates across nation states. Okay, right. So we have what is anthropology, right? This is going to talk about like historical conditions and cultural proximity, right? Okay. I want you to explain to me how this is going to prove scientifically, right? One, this is social science anyway, so it's not a science, right? Like, in terms of being a science, it's not a science, right? It's just not. I'm sorry, right? But you can't scientifically prove an economic theory to be false. That's just dumb. But unless you were to say that there was like an actual economic law, and you can show me like economic laws that are actually, you know, scientifically verified, like scientific consensus approves of certain economic law. No, there is no such thing. So you can't scientifically dismiss any economic theory. As much as I would like to scientifically dismiss capitalism, I cannot do that. Let's have a look. Let's actually just have a quick read of the abstract. How historical connections, events, and cultural proximity can influence human development is being increasingly recognized. One aspect of history that has only recently begun to be examined is deep cultural ancestry. The vertical relationship of descent between cultures can easily be represented. Okay, so like, it's going to tell me that communism was bad for the people that lived under it, and I don't disagree, because what we're going to be talking about is, again, like those totalitarian states where the individual was oppressed, was, you know, absolutely crushed under the mobilized anti-capitalist state. I'll have to give it like a full read, but this is what I'm taking from this. This is going to compare essentially geographic development between individuals, and then show that how it's changed, modified by culture. And so we could take one culture and compare it to another culture with a similar geographic like resource distribution and stuff like that. And then we should be able to show which culture was more successful. Of course, that is a massively oversimplified version of history even. And when it comes to economics, it's painfully overly simplified. I mean, it doesn't even take into consideration like the fact that obviously the way that cultures compete, and even something, so for example, like within Stalinism, we talk about like Eastern European. It's like, don't get me wrong, I do hate Stalinism, I do hate the way that communism functioned, but it was militaristically impressive. It managed to mobilize an incredible amount of individuals around a common cause, fighting a common enemy, and generated a considerable amount of wealth in a very short period of time. It took the USSR, Russia, from being a backward agricultural nation to basically one of the most powerful nations in the world. And I think that's undeniable. Otherwise, they would have been obliterated by the United States long ago. The point of the matter is, taking into consideration the economic policies of the USSR were also in relation to being anti-capitalist. It's not that they were just simply one culture operating on a communist like sort of regime. It was the fact that they were also anti-capitalist, and that has a big sway in how they even mobilized their economy. The fact that they were so militaristic, bankrupt themselves, and ultimately destroyed their nation because of how many nuclear weapons and arms they were producing is a big factor of this. I will give this a read. Socialism has built the mechanism for dealing with the final stage of collapse. Starve all the people who might complain. Like, I think that like the reality is that what people expect socialism to be is this like idea of starvation, and that's because they've mostly been competing in a capitalist environment, right? So if you take a nation rises up, it's communist, it's socialist, right? And then it's isolated like Cuba from trade with every other capitalist nation. Like, for whatever reason, like we will not allow you to have an autonomous nation that does not confide by our distributionary methods. No. You must obey the global regime of capitalism, otherwise we will shoot you. And that's one of the biggest problems of socialism and communism, is the fact that it rejects capitalism. And that's why revolutionary thinking is what it doesn't really work for that reason as a whole, because it ultimately makes an enemy of all of the power structures that already currently exist. And so, like, unless you are able to commit a revolution that ultimately destroys the power structures that exist, like in today's society, like that's something like the American Revolution against the British, which was able to expel the British, or whether it's the French Revolution, which was able to expel the monarchy, or whether it was the British Civil War, which managed to expel the monarchy, or the Russian Revolution, which managed to dispose of its aristocracy. Each one of those cases destroyed the power structures that were ultimately going to undermine the power of the rising state that was going to take its place, right? But ultimately, it's not just about expelling like one power structure. So like in the Russian Revolution, they managed to expel Russian power structures, but then all of the Western power structures still existed, which wanted to destroy their current regime. So it's it's not so simple, and also revolutionary thinking is backward anyway. It doesn't, one, it's bloody messy and horrible, but also it doesn't actually allow for the institutional development of the individual. And many of the times, like, so for example in the Russian Revolution, it was vanguard thinking. It didn't allow individuals to actually actively rationalize how they should develop their state, and instead destroyed all of the institutions they already had and replaced them with poorly constructed institutions developed by a select group of individuals who had their own specific interests. So all we did really all that happened really in the Russian Revolution was a replacement of one class's interest with another class's interests, and that's why the inequality and the harm was constantly propagated. And so socialism's not a mechanism that like basically kills people and lets people die of starvation. Socialism can be the solution to that issue. I mean, actually, even if we talk about the USSR managed to essentially take Russia under its prior feudal capitalist state to something far more sustainable in terms of actually feeding its population. I mean, don't get me wrong, it has its horrible problems. As I say, it was a disgusting nation, but it did manage to feed its population, unlike the prior state.